This is the ideal scroll bar. You may not like it, but this is what peak scroll bar performance looks like. What's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a custom scroll bar for your website using CSS. We'll start off with the basic CSS properties, and then I'll gradually show you some more complex examples to give you some ideas for your own website. I have to give a little bit of a shout out to Sean Wang because his website is kind of what kickstarted this whole idea and what made me look into CSS scroll bars. I think it's definitely a way that you can make your website kind of stick in somebody's head, because you go to a website and you see something like this, you just really kind of remember it compared to just the generic scroll bar. And there's also some other popular sites that do a little more basic, but CSS Tricks obviously has a dark version, so it kind of fits with the theme of their website. And I've seen even YouTube now, I don't know, recently, at least for me, it showed up as that they're now have a little kind of a minimalist version of a scroll bar. There are maybe some pros and cons you should keep in mind before you implement this. There's some people who say that you should never really touch default user interface things because it might kind of confuse your users. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You might not want to go too crazy with it. On the other hand, I think it can be useful for branding, really standing out from the crowd, like I said earlier, or just having it go better. Like if you have a dark theme like CSS Tricks, it just looks better when you have that custom styling. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. All we need for this project is going to be two files, our index.html and then a styles.css. What we need is just the basic HTML setup with a link to our style sheet, and then inside the body we're going to have a class for our container, and then we're going to have an h1 tag with our title, whatever you want that to be for the page, and then we're going to have a bunch of dummy text with the class of paragraph. For our basic styling for that markup, we're just going to have our body tag with some default font family set. We're going to have a margin of 0. For our paragraph, we're going to set the font size to 16, some padding around those, and then set the width to 70%. For the container, it's going to be a flex box and column format for the direction, and then we're going to align all that in the center. So now on to the actual CSS properties we can use to customize these scroll bars. For Chrome, Edge, and Safari, which are WebKit browsers, what we have are the HTML or body : then WebKit scrollbar. We're going to use that basically just to set the width. We have the same thing with WebKit scrollbar track, and that is the actual entire track length of our sidebar. We can use that to set our background. We can add a border radius to round it, and I'll go more in depth in that later. And then finally we have what's called the WebKit scrollbar thumb, which is the actual kind of tab, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, that we can drag around on the scroll bar, and we can customize that pretty much any way we want as well. Kind of annoying thing is that Firefox really doesn't support those same properties, and they've really limited what you can actually do when it comes to styling on Firefox. So the only two properties they provide are scrollbar-width, and for that all you get is auto or thin. And then they also provide scrollbar-color, which you can use to style the coloring of the scroll and the thumb and the track, but it's a lot more limited compared to what you can do with Chrome. For our first example, we're going to keep it pretty simple with just a kind of knockoff version of CSS's Tricks scrollbar. So to start, we're going to make the width of the scrollbar 20 pixels, and then for the track, our background color will be black. For the thumb, then we're going to go with a darkish gray color. You can use whatever you want. And then for the border radius, to make it rounded, we're going to go with 25 pixels. And once we save that, we can see we get this simple, but kind of it'd work well for like a dark theme, and you can obviously add some gradient and a little bit of shadow effect like CSS Tricks is version, and make it look a little bit better. Next up, we're going to make a thin kind of minimalist version of a scroll bar, and we're also going to add in some hover and an active CSS property effect. So first up, we're going to make the width 10 pixels, and then we're going to make our track. I'm going to use an RGB value, but it's kind of like a lightish gray. We're going to make the border radius 10 pixels, and then for the thumb, we're going to make it slightly darker gray, and again make that radius 10 pixels. on hover, we're going to have our thumb become a little bit darker gray again. And then finally on our active, when we click to drag, we're going to make it an even darker gray. So when we click save, we can see the result. When we scroll over here, we can see it gets a little bit darker. And then when we go to drag, we can see it gets darker again. So you can kind of make it more interactive, and that's good, I think, for like a usability perspective. Like sometimes if you don't get the colors right, like you can't even tell sometimes like where you're, like whether you're actually on the proper area. So by adding that, it makes it a little bit more usable, I guess. Now we're going to make a kind of striped effect on our scroll bar track. So first we're going to set the width of the scroll bar to 20 pixels, and the track, our background image property is going to be a repeating linear gradient with an angle of 45 degrees, and then we're going to go red to red with 1 pixel, and then transparent 0, transparent 50%, and that'll give us kind of an angled red line going up our scroll bar. For the thumb, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to show you kind of a cool little effect that you can use no matter what you actually set the track to look like. I think this is pretty cool, and there's a lot of different things you can do with it. So we're going to set our background to transparent. We're going to add a border radius to make it kind of rounded, and so that's going to be 5 pixels. And then we're actually going to create a border around our thumbnail, or thumb, and we're going to set that 2 pixels solid black. And then we're going to have a box shadow with an inset property. We're going to have 1 pixel for X and Y, and then we're going to have a 5 pixel like fade or range, whatever it is, and we're going to set the color to black. You can see the result is this mostly transparent scroll bar, but that radius around it lets it be so we can still kind of see it. For the final effect, we're going to create a kind of fake color change on our scroll bar. So we're going to set our width to 20 pixels. For the track, then we're going to create just a basic linear gradient. You can set it to whatever colors you want. And then the key thing is going to be our thumb, where we're going to set our background to transparent, and then we're going to create a box shadow with 0, 0, 0 pixels, but we're going to make the final value 100 VH for our view height, and we're going to make it black or whatever color you want it to be that fits with your website. And what this does when we click save, so we can see as we scroll down, it looks like our scroll bar is actually changing, but what's happening is we're basically just revealing the color of the actual track underneath. Because this is transparent and that box shadow makes everything around it black, it looks like the thumb is changing color, but what's actually happening is that it's transparent, and as we scroll, it reveals the background. But I just thought that's a pretty cool effect. It's a little bit more complicated, but I like what it does, and it's actually pretty simple behind the scenes. So that's pretty much it for this video. I'm far from a CSS wizard, so there's probably a ton of cool ideas that are possible, and I didn't even think about it. So if you can think of anything that you think would be cool, be sure to make that and leave a CodePen or a Replit link in the description so that other people can check that stuff out. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. Thanks.